reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 216 after a week off because everybody's hurt, including myself. If you're watching on the YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot, you're probably seeing a slightly paler, sicker version of me, but we're battling through it. I'm not going to call it a flu game, but I am still battling the elements. And we are, obviously, as a club, still battling the elements. Tottenham Hotspur is still struggling, and we're going to struggle through another pod here today to find some positives, but we will do so. We've got Scott alongside. Scott is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, I would ask how you're doing, but I think we all know how we're all doing, right?
Yeah, from a footballing perspective, it could be better, but women got a big win. We said off air before we got started that at this point, as a Spurs fan, 3 points anywhere is fucking fantastic. So happy to see that dub. But yeah, on the men's side, as you can see from anyone watching on YouTube, just fuck the league. Who gives a shit? Whatever. Let's get ready for the next club match.
You got to. That's the way it goes. Caroline is also here at CG Stefko. Caroline, what else can we say?
I mean, I think we have a lot to say, actually. This pod may get out of hand because I know we all are feeling very opinionated at the moment. But yeah, just hanging in there and hoping that this injury crisis on the men's side will end eventually and that the women's team will look like an actual team at some point.
At some point, perhaps. TC is also with us at TC_Show and at the Todd Father on Blue Sky. Todd, what's up, my man?
Any day, it's you can hop on the pod with your mates and chat about a rousing midweek victory in Europe is a good fucking day. I don't know what else will we talk about.
There's the positivity we were looking for. I knew we would find it somewhere. Yeah, we do have a victory to talk about there. In fact, there are a total of 7 matches that we have not discussed on the pod since we missed last week. Thanks to those of you guys who reached out. Not a big deal. I was traveling last week, took a little trip up to Las Vegas with the wife for the weekend. Actually got a chance to see Lionel Messi in person in a little friendly, which was kind of cool. And then ended up sick because of it. Not because of it, but from it. And Tottenham just made me even more sick all week long, despite that victory against Hoffenheim at midweek. Guys, I don't really know where to start because there are so many games to discuss, and we're not going to go through every game. We're going to have a little bit more of a big picture conversation, if you will. But Todd, I'll start with this because you kind of brought it up in our little pre-show discussion. More and more conversation about Ange Postecoglou and his job after the run of form, winless in 7 Premier League matches, which only include 1 draw. This team is being ripped apart at the seams by injuries, new injuries this week to Brennan Johnson, Dominic Solanke, long-term concerns, few players coming back into training like Christian Romero and Guglielmo Vicario. But at this point, and I guess it's a good place for us to just preface everything, where are we with Ange Postecoglou? I know a lot of people are calling for his job and a lot of people are defending him, but where are you right now, just in your brain about all of this stuff?
I'm firmly Ange in. You have to understand, Andrew, it's been 163 days since this club has completed a deal to sign an outfield player. We are running these poor boys ragged. And Ange is standing there doing the best he can with what he's got to work with. And it's been next man up across the board. But when you turn around and the next man up is like 16 years old, it's a tough situation. And you can put that squarely on the shoulders of one miserly little gentleman named Daniel Levy. And I don't think that I think there's a piece coming out in the Mirror, the Mail, excuse me, this upcoming week. And forgive me, I can't remember the author's name, but it's a scathing retrospective on the way that Daniel Levy has run the club over the course of the last 5 years. And it's going to show that no matter how many managers he has, without paying the wages for the top players, we're always going to end up in a position to where we either don't have the folks that we need in the positions that they need to play in order for us to be successful, or we flat out don't have the players. And we'll come on to it, but I don't understand what Ange is supposed to do when his second and his third team players are dropping like flies because they're exhausted.
I don't want to I feel like for the last handful of months, we've started every pod with like, okay, where are we now? We've been in kind of what feels like a similar place for a while, but like, Scott, is there a grander solution other than sign some players to get reinforcements or fire the manager? It feels like there's a binary forming for a lot of people. And I obviously on this podcast, we try to take things with a little more nuance and a little more context, and it's not a binary to me, at least. But where are you at with all of this?
Yeah, it's definitely not binary. I think there's maybe this general idea that if you're Ange in, that means he's perfect, and if you're Ange out, that means Levy is fucking running the club into the ground. And there's very much gray for me. I was talking about this in our chat earlier today. 99% of the blame falls at Daniel Levy's feet, but I don't think Ange Postecoglou is blameless either. And I think there's a lot that I could say, so I'll slow it down, and we'll talk about this gradually throughout the episode for sure. But I don't think that sacking Ange does anything for the club at all. Excuse me, from the perspective of a positive move or a positive decision, right? I think until the root cause, which is Daniel Levy, is washed out or addressed, whatever that we want to say, until that problem's addressed, we're going to continue to run into the same issue, which is a manager who doesn't have what he needs or he or she needs to be able to do what they're trying to do. Now, I also don't believe that investment leads to winning trophies. It does take a manager, and there are times where I wonder if Ange does have all the chops required from what I'm seeing to do that, right? But I believe that he needs to be given a shot to show that he is or is not capable of winning trophies, and that's going to take more investment. I just saw a very damning statistic that comes from Twitter, and it's Kane from the Lane who posted this, but Spurs, when it comes to percentage of wages to income, right, for the club, we are dead last or first, if you want to call it that, whatever it is, right? But 47% of our income attributes to wages. Clubs like Newcastle 86%, Leicester 85%, Chelsea 77%, right? Yeah. And then you couple that with Daniel Levy being the highest paid director in the Premier League.
Yep. And it went up this year.
Yeah, something doesn't add up for me, right? So, like I said, 99% of our problems fall firmly at the feet of Daniel Levy. I just don't think Ange Postecoglou is blameless by any means. And I feel like I come across plenty of people who think that he is, and I'm not calling them out, right? I'm just saying I think there is a differentiation there, and I don't think that Ange is blameless when I look at some decisions that he's made as well.
Caroline, I think the one spot that we've been able to point to a little bit with, finding some blame for Ange, and not that we're looking for it, but it's there when you're talking about injuries to players and playing them through injury and dealing with a squad that has just been ravaged by this crisis. Where do you sit with all of this?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to take it. I do think Ange has to take a little bit of responsibility for the injury crisis we find ourselves in, because at a certain point, I do feel like it's pretty clear he has started to prioritize the cup competitions. Like, we're seeing the evidence of that in our league form, but I don't think he has, fully committed to that in the sense that he could be using these league games that he seems to have written off as opportunities to rest players who are really just being run into the ground at this point across the board. And that goes for players who were starters at the beginning of the season, players who have become starters out of necessity. I feel like the time for him to be proactive about, resting players so that we didn't pick up further injuries has long since passed. That's my main frustration with him. However, I am still Ange in, and I think I speak for a lot of fans when I say this. I just don't have the appetite or the patience for another manager search, and to go through the same cycle all over again. I feel like at some point the club has to actually commit to a manager and see it through. And obviously we know there are a lot of other factors that are going to go into how successful he can be, because he's not a miracle worker. He has to have that investment in the playing squad. And I do agree that we've not seen enough of that, certainly in this window, particularly when we really could use it. So it's a tough one, but I feel like we have to stick with him and hope we can get something out of the Cups this season. Cause it really is just dire in the league right now.
Yeah, the only pushback that I have there is that I don't think that it's fair to say that Ange is clearly not prioritizing the league, because you can't not prioritize the league. The other thing is that this is the biggest, strongest, fastest, most physical league in the world, and if you don't have the depth in squad, like we see it year on year, like people get hurt. This isn't a surprise. People get hurt. The other piece of that is we've had Ange for almost 18 months now. And Ange has told people, you've seen everywhere he's gone, hey, hamstrings are a thing. Hey, I run people. And you know what? But we're going to need some folks to be, if we're playing that system, and this is what everybody's committed to, we're going to need the horses to run that race. 163 days since an outfield player has been signed for this club. Like, we saw it in 2018 or whatever, coming off the back of an undefeated 2017, coming off the back of an undefeated season, the last season at White Hart Lane. No investment for the clubs over 3 windows, from the club over 3 windows. Like, we've seen that Daniel Levy has a pattern of not investing in the football club. And everybody's always said, oh, Spurs don't have the dollars. Oh, the wages are an issue. Spurs can't spend the money. Oh, plucky little Spurs. Fuck that. We're the 8th richest club in the world. And we have a wage disparity on par with South fucking Hampton. And
Can
so
I
when
just add to
ahead.
interject, I know we're talking about the men's team right now, and I don't want to totally take the focus away, but we see the same thing on the women's side. There is that
you're
pattern
right.
of investment one season, not doing it the next, and just cycling over and over. And I'm starting to get fed up with it.
Exactly. And so, like, as we bring it back to Ange, Scotty, I just wanted to point out the fact that everybody's looking around going, oh, well, the time for Ange to rest players has long since passed. When has Ange ever had the opportunity to rest players? We've had people started getting hurt from the beginning of last season, and it hasn't fucking stopped. It was so bad in our recovery from these injuries, we fired the whole fucking medical staff. Which, first and foremost, I'm the one over here going, we should have done that 10 fucking years ago, but that's a different conversation. The fact that it happened now, all of those things have happened. We have lost a full first team of players to injury this season, and we're still in 4 competitions. I just want to say that. So as much as everybody says Ange hasn't rested players or Ange hasn't done enough to, give these people, the man management's been off, la-da-da-da-da. We're not in that backroom staff. That man has forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, and forgotten more about managing players than I'll ever know. And he's won more silverware than anybody else that has been associated with this club in a long fucking time. And the second piece of that is that he's won more silverware in Europe than any of these other clowns, Areola and all of this business that are chirping in his heels. We need to bring in Graham Potters and all this bullshit. So, from my perspective, Scotty, I don't really see how else you can go, how you can confidently go away from Ange, given how deep we are in the Ange project.
I agree with all of that. I think there's a couple asterisks to throw in here. One, we're talking a lot about Levy. I'll say it again. I've said it a lot on this show. Daniel Levy answers to Enoch, right? He does have a profit and loss sheet that is probably his primary responsibility as the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. So a lot of Levy out. It's Enoch. Enoch is the issue, right? And Levy works for Enoch. He is an employee of Enoch, so we'll never know how much of that is actually Levy versus those above him, right? But it is Enoch's that's the issue. That I think that's important to point out, and that's all I'm doing when I say that. And the other thing, we're talking a lot about not investing. I think it is that, but it's also the way that we've built and the way that we have invested. I think we spent $200 million this past summer, if I do the math correctly, or somewhere between 150 and 200, right? And in my opinion, 1.5 of those players are ready to contribute to the first team, and that's Dom Solanke and half of Archie Gray, and that's probably it, right?
I push back on that. Archie Gray's been incredible. He's been one of the reasons why
he's been awesome, dude. But he's 18, is all I'm saying. So like, why I say half is that like at some point an 18-year-old will have to figure some shit out, right? So,
well, especially when you're playing him in 5 different positions.
Exactly.
Like,
so
how can he figure anything out? And I love his versatility, but like, how can you?
Oh, he's awesome. He's awesome.
That's the thing that.
Yeah. Me giving him a half is not a knock on him at all. And we could say 2 if we want. It's fine. But Dom Solanke, Archie Gray-ish, and that's really it. Bergvall's looked okay. He's looked good, but he's 18 and he's got a lot of improvement. And he's got a lot.
He's come on in the last 3 weeks. Significantly.
Scott, what you're speaking to was the main criticism coming out of the summer window, in that Spurs bought for the future and not for the now. And exactly. I think that that's fine as long as you recognize that this was going to be a slog. I think when we look back at this season, at the end of it, not now, but when it's said and done, so long as it, and I'm going to say something here that's not going to be that shocking, but so long as this season ends with Spurs remaining in the Premier League, we're going to look back at this season and realize it was a lost season because of what you're talking about. They did not buy enough players to be competitive now, and to add to that depth now. They bought for the future. They bought Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall. They bought all, Youngmin Hyuk. Like, they bought all of these players that are for the future, and that's all fine and well. But when you start having to throw all of those for the future players into the now because of injuries, you're getting a team that sits 15th, has lost so many games in a row, and is struggling to keep its head above water.
100%. And I think where there can be some push against Ange, and where I even was in the chat this morning saying Ange isn't blameless, this squad has been depleted and lacked depth for the last decade. I've lived every second of it, right? Never have we been in this position in the Premier League since I've been a fan. 13 losses. So again, Ange was dealt a very difficult hand, but we have lacked depth for a very long time, and it's never been this bad. And that's where I start to ask some questions, not with Ange and his job. I'm very much Ange in, but what's going on here? I was about to mention this earlier, and I'll just say it now. I came across his post-match presser or whatever in the tunnel, right? Not the official press conference, right? But just a quick interview in the tunnel. He said a few things I didn't love. He said, all I can ask from the guys is they give their all. I think that's a bare minimum when you're a professional footballer, right? And again, I'm not blaming him for saying that. I think it's something that is a talking point for me, right? That there can be more than just asking for them to give their all. That's on the manager. I also think that he said he kind of gave a pass for the way that we conceded those 2 goals, and he said, no, we created enough chances to win that game. We played well. I vehemently disagree with that. I do not think
I don't know how you can say that. Both of those points make me frustrated, and I'll tell you why. These guys are absolutely dead on their fucking feet. They're dead on their feet. They were dead on their feet after Hoffenheim. They were dead on their feet after Everton. We've played a bunch of games away from home. This is the first game that we've had at the stadium. We're exhausted. We went up 1-0 and we let our guard down. We came out flat at the beginning of the second half. But, dude, we hit the fucking woodwork 3 times in the second half. Like, we created enough chances to win. Sonny had one in the first half that bounced off of the crossbar. Like, the thing is that we absolutely did what needed to be done. We didn't finish our chances, and we're frail at the fucking back. Our guys are gassed, and we've got 18-year-olds running their fucking skin off right now. And I don't know, when you look at this squad, how do you look at those players and say, I want you to give more than I've seen you give in the last 96 hours? Well, I'm just curious. You're saying, well, it's a bare minimum that they do the best they can. And I don't know.
I'm not looking at the players, man. I'm looking at Ange when I say this, because for him to say, who cares that we conceded, we created enough chances, and for him to say the players have given everything that they can, I'm talking about our conversation just before we started, the decisions that he made in the lineup, right? He came out and we now know that he came out and said Popsar shouldn't have played. He wasn't fit. There are fit players on the field. there are players who are youth players for sure who I think can at least, because of fitness reasons, be in position. The 2 goals we conceded, Pedro Porro wildly out of position, Popsar wildly out of position, Bergvall wildly out of position, Bentaker positionally soundish, right? For both of those goals, that's fatigue. Ange can make decisions, in my opinion, that lead to that not happening. So I'm not looking at the players at all when I say they need to give more or anything like that. I'm just saying that his comments that we did enough to win and negating the way we conceded those 2 goals, a bit of a scapegoat for me from Ange Postecoglou, and I don't
know, dude. And the only reason why I'm going to push back on that is because I look at the conversation that we had before the pod, where if I'm making the Ange decision, if I'm in the room, I know that 75 or 70% of Popsar is better than Callum Odiesi or whatever. Like I know that, and so yes, are there going to be moments where because of fatigue we lax and give up something? 100%. And I think that's what Ange was saying more than anything else. But we really, really, really did create enough to make that game go away in a comfortable fashion. And we just didn't. And I don't know if that's fatigue too, Scotty. We just didn't pull the trigger when we had the chance.
For sure.
So
no,
let me
I don't disagree.
Question.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you guys this question, because I've come into the league matches in the last time. There's been 3 on the men's side, 3 Premier League matches that we have not discussed. And like I said, we're not going to get into the details of all 3 of them because they all have their own. I think they all have their own distinct stink to them, but they also all have a very similar stink to them. There's the North London Derby, which was, I think, always going to go in a way similar to where it went, where Arsenal just don't look like they're going to run us out of the gym, but sure enough, they're going to get the victory because that's what happens at the Emirates. There's the Everton match last week where Spurs, for some unknown reason, came out in the back 3. I guess Ange wanted to go to plan D or E instead of just B or C in that one. And
but remember, he doesn't change it up, Andrew.
Right, he doesn't change it up. Well, they were down 3-0 at halftime, and then he switched back to his normal ways, which I think says a lot of why he doesn't change it up sometimes. And then there's this one against Leicester where Spurs get a really nice goal from Richie early on, and then come out at halftime, and within a span of 4 or 5 minutes, that lead is gone and the legs aren't there to get it back. None of these matches to me were surprising, and I would even border on saying when it comes to the league right now, this is just what I expect. I expect a team that by the 55th, 60th, 65th minute, you better have a 3-goal lead by that point, because that's when the waves are going to come. And I guess I'm a little bit trying to just like diffuse you guys are having a great conversation back and forth about Ange, and that's all fine and well, but unless something actually changes and the board makes a decision that I've frankly been fearful of for the last handful of weeks and months, because I don't want to see it go that way. I don't like what Caroline said earlier. I don't want to see them press a reset button that I think just sends us into this same cycle of, we've been spending 18 months now trying to build something under a guy, and then when you tear the rug out, where does that leave you? I would like to see them continue to build under this and try to make this thing better, because I think it can be better. We've seen it be good in moments, but right now, I just have no expectation. I have no, and that, like Scott, to your point, this is the first time in my fandom, I think, which is going on a decade, where no, it's more than that. It's 2025. Remember, like, this is the first time I felt no hope for a league match. Now, we can talk about the cups, and it's a little bit different because it's knockouts, and it's, Spurs are actually weirdly enough performing well in the Europa League right now. But when it comes to the league, I don't know where the prioritization is, and I don't know where the hope is. And I joked about a relegation scrap, but Spurs are legit. Like, this is the first time that I can remember that Spurs are in a legitimate relegation scrap because of the position that they've put themselves in. I mean, this is a team that has quite literally shot itself in the foot a number of times, and then they've gone and shot themselves in the ankle and the knee as well. Like, this is all of their own doing. So I don't really know. Like, there's no easy button to click. There's that reset button, which I don't want them to click, but there's also no easy button to click to make all of this kind of just magically get better.
Well, hold on. I mean, there's a couple of things you could do, Scotty. I mean, you could buy some fucking players. I don't know. That might be helpful.
Can I add here, though? I feel like people are not fully acknowledging the fact that other clubs who could be selling players to us know that we're desperate, might not want to let their own players go because they're still figuring things out.
Yep.
And frankly, I still think we're suffering. I know I harp on this all the time, but we're still suffering the effects of past transfer windows in terms of players that we can't move on, not having that space in the squad that we need. I mean, we saw like Sergio Reguilon come out today and put in an absolute stinker, and that's just where we're at. So I don't think it's, obviously I wish that we had another outfield player come in this window because we really could use it, but I don't think it's necessarily that simple.
Well, it's not a matter of simplicity. It's a matter of like, either we get players back, which I mean, we hope is going to happen, and we hope we don't rush them back, and we hope they do okay. And then, the other option is you actually bring in some folks that we know are fit, and theoretically, Ange doesn't break them in the first 2 weeks that we have them, and we can actually do something with them. So, it's not that there's a simple fix. It's just you look around and go, what are the things that we can do? And what are the things that we are doing? But don't
you risk buying another Radu Dragusin if you just go buy the bodies
or Sergio Reguilon
or Sergio Reguilon?
That's whoa. The Sergio Reguilon piece is rough. The only thing worse than that guy's play today was his hairstyle. But I'm just saying that is not an Ange. That is not an Ange problem. That is not a Johan Langel problem.
That's a good point, Todd. He has inherited the situation, and I think that's why we do have some patience for Ange in that respect.
Yeah. And they've done, to be fair, they've done a good job, Andrew, of like moving players along over the course of the last 18 months. I will say that. There was a lot of dead weight, and they've cleared out the majority of it.
And we all knew that was going to be the first and maybe second and third steps of this process. Like that is part of the
Yeah, but what the history, Andrew, is the history of not replacing like for like the things that you get rid of. And that's the biggest thing that we've seen is not replacing like for like the things that we've gotten rid of. And so we needed depth on the back line. We needed depth all over the place. And it's tough because it's like, here's the thing. If we don't have basically season-ending injuries to Odebear, right, who knows what that is? If we don't miss Mikey Moore for half the year, who knows what that is? Then we're able to rotate Son. Then we're able to rotate Brennan. Then we're able to rotate Solanke if we don't have Richie dead to the world for the majority of the time. Like, and this is the thing, we could play the what-if game across the board, but it's like when they set this up, they didn't set this up with enough players for us to be successful. And like we've been saying that for months. Like, you need more. This isn't enough. One injury here and we're fucked. Guess what, dude? We've had one injury here to all of the places that if we had one injury here, we were fucked. And they all happened at the same time, and now we're 15th. And everybody's around scratching their ass going, gosh, I wonder what Ange could do different to make this. It's like, fucking, we don't have the horses to run this race, and people are looking around going, how come you guys aren't fast?
Right. Well, I equated it the other day to, look, it's bitterly cold everywhere across the country. If you walk out in the middle of winter with shorts and a t-shirt on, you're going to be cold. But
yeah,
if you don't have a jacket to put on, if you don't have pants, if you don't have snow boots, like you have to prepare yourself for what you're walking into. And there's just the reason I say there's no easy button is a little bit to what Caroline's talking about. You can't just bring a play. Like, everyone wants to say Levy out because he doesn't spend. Well, you can't just spend. Like, you cannot always just throw money at a problem unless you're going to change the entire structure. And I'm talking wage.
And you should. Should change the fucking wage structure. That's the whole point.
100% you should.
Which is probably not going to happen mid-season, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's not a good time to break the wage structure is all I'm saying. Like, if you're going to make that decision, you got to choose to make that decision. There's never a good time. Nobody's going to be happy about it. You're going to have to blow it up.
Yeah, and Caroline's point earlier was really well taken. I think if you look back through the history of, again, this is just my history of Tottenham Hotspur. It's Wande Ramos, it's Harry Redknapp, then it's AVB, then it's Tim Sherwood, who I thought was pretty fucking cool, actually. I'm in the small minority there, right?
Then Tim Sherwood.
Then it's Mauricio Pochettino, and we know the rest from there, right? Pochettino, I think, was the only one who was able to do anything with this, and that was all just kind of a luck and timing thing, right? First of all, he's a guru with youth. but he came across Dele and Harry Kane, and we got Eriksson on the cheap, and we got Toby
and a young Min. We had Hugo, who somehow decided he wanted to stay at Spurs when he had opportunities to go to Madrid and these other places, right? So things really worked really well for Pochettino, but that's the only time it's ever worked for this club. We ran a serial winner into the ground in Mourinho. We ran a serial winner in Conte into the ground. We ran a serial winner in Nuno Espirito. I'm just kidding, but Nuno didn't quite work out, right?
Looks pretty good right now, doesn't he? I mean,
yeah, he does, right?
And they finally lost.
Maybe he is. And now here we are with Ange Postecoglou. So it's 100%. Like I said earlier, let me back up. 99%. I stand firmly on that, on ENIC and the board, right? But to tie it all back to Caroline's point, we've put ourselves in a really precarious position by saving $5 million here, $5 million there, $5 million here, and having this awesome budget sheet. We've put ourselves in a situation where absolutely zero fucking clubs want anything to do with doing business with Tottenham Hotspur, right? Though until we are willing to, like you said, completely flip the wage structure and start throwing way overpriced fees at all these players that we need, and I'm talking like probably double what they're worth, right? Because people are so fucking fed up with Tottenham and ENIC. We're going to be in a really tough spot. And so ultimately, I don't really know what else changes until the club is sold or the wage structure is flipped. And I don't think that's going to happen, right? I think that we're barring some miracle, we're just going to continue to be hurting for a while as a club. And we may win a League Cup. We may win a Europa League even. But when it comes to sustainability in the Premier League, I think we're going to be hurting for quite a while, unfortunately.
Again, when we look back at this season and realize that there were contributions from the likes of Sergio Reguilon, Brendan Austin, Callum Olasise, like these are names that we don't really think are going to, like, next season. Are these guys going to, maybe Olasise will, like, because he's a youth player and maybe he's going to grow into something, but like there's been so many names put forth for this team that weren't expected to have to do anything but be around. And that is, I think, what we're going to look back on after this season is said and done. Again, as long as Spurs can keep themselves in the Premier League, and we'll at least be able to like hat tip, but like that's not how this should be for a club, to your point, Todd, that is in a financial standing that this club is. Like, that's just not. And that's where the animosity towards Daniel Levy and ENIC and everything comes from. It comes from the fact that these two things are well out of balance. And again, when you get yourself into the pickle that this club has gotten itself into over the last handful of years, there is not an easy way out of it. They've dug this hole. They now need to dig themselves out of it.
I totally fucking disagree. And I totally disagree. I really, truly, truly believe that what this boils down to is breaking the wage structure. And the thing is, but hold on. The thing is that leading up to moving into the new stadium, our match day revenue, the external, outside of football things that we're able to do, the amenities within the stadium were pennies on the dollar compared to what we're making in the new stadium. The amount of millions of pounds that come in every single week that we hold a match at the stadium is incredible. Like, we are generating the revenue in order to facilitate the wage structure required to consistently compete as one of the top clubs in the world. We're choosing not to because we want to reflect as much profit as possible. Mm-hmm. And the reason why, and I'm just going to be 100% honest with you right now, Daniel makes his bonus off of our profitability margin. So when Daniel goes, and you'll read in this piece on Tuesday, Daniel's salary can fluctuate between $3.5 and $6.5 million a year based off of our level of profitability. So in a year where we finished 8th, but we had fucking Anthony Joshua and Beyonce at the stadium, Daniel's profitability margin was awesome. And he ended up making $6.5 million. And we ended up thumbing our asses looking around asking if the ball boy can play. No offense to Jamie Donnelly.
I look, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I think what you're asking for is almost like asking for Bigfoot to come out of the woods and just show himself and turn himself in. Like I think what you're asking for in terms of the wage structure just changing is one of those I'll believe it when I see it types of things. I just cannot get behind the idea that that's going to magically happen.
It's exactly why I say things like it's never going to change until the club is sold, because as I said earlier, Daniel Levy's number one responsibility is a P&L sheet. That is his job, right? And that's because Enix's mentality towards the way that they want to, utilize their asset in Tottenham Hotspur Football Club is not to win things. It is no longer a trope to say those things. It is very clear that they are not interested in winning football matches or winning trophies. They're interested in making buckets of money, and they're doing that very well. And so they don't give a shit. And so until
the Rolling Stones just announced 3 dates at the stadium this year, Scotty.
Right there. So until the club is sold, for me, it's not even about the wage structure. That's not going to happen. Until the club is sold, we're going to continue to have the same conversation. We're going to continue to see Ange Postecoglou, wherever comes next, asked to win trophies with absolutely nothing available to them to be able to do that, right? And it's just going to be round and round. And frankly, Enoch probably is perfectly fine with these conversations continuing to happen in a circular manner, because it just allows them to keep operating and keep focus away from what the actual problem is, right?
And because Beavertown is full every single match day. So what do they care?
Well, it is delicious. I will say that. I do want to just take a moment and talk about the Europa League for a minute, because, we had that period of time where there weren't Europa League matches, and Spurs did get back into the Europa League this week with what I thought was a really gutty and important win. And I know we're talking about much grander things, but when you boil it down to this team is depleted, this team needed to go on the road to Germany and face a Hoffenheim team that, is down bad, but you still have to go get a win in Europe on the road in a tough environment. And they did that on Thursday. And that was really cool to see and filled me with a lot of just pride for the badge. And there were players out there playing for the badge, players like James Madison, who was so exhausted from what he put in on Thursday that he couldn't even appear in the matchday squad today on Sunday, those kinds of things. And I thought it was a very vintage Heung-min Son performance with the 2 goals that he scored, even though they weren't glorious goals, it was a gritty get the job done type of thing. And for a team that was on the outside of that top 8 and is now on the inside of that top 8 after victory and has one more match coming up this week back at home in what's I'm sure not going to be a great environment just because of the general vibes around the club. If this team ends up finishing the top 8 out of these, out of this field, I think that's an accomplishment. I think that's something
100%
to really acknowledge. And I thought if you didn't see the James Madison interview after the game at Hoffenheim, go seek it out, because it really spoke to just what this team is going through from the players' standpoint. And I do feel for the players. I know that we dig out the players when they deserve it. But boy, there was some really good leadership stuff going on there from James Madison in that interview. And Caroline, I know you saw that and felt a little bit of that too. It was really, really, that was an important, if they don't get the full 3 points there, things become much more precarious because you're potentially adding to your fixture list as well.
Right. And I think he was really putting the focus on where it needed to be in terms of really praising the performances of the young players, who I think came through in a big way. But also, I guess you could say he was somewhat bragging about his own performance and Son's as well as senior leaders of the team. But this is why I have been saying I feel like maybe it's not fully conscious on their part, but I do feel like Ange and the players are prioritizing the cups. Because to me, there's been a very clear difference in just the attitude around these fixtures compared to the league ones. And that goes with the interviews as well after the games. I just feel like you can see they really wanted those games. And, even something like that first leg win against Liverpool, the same situation, they were really going for it. And I don't feel like the players feel they can balance all the competitions at this point. So, it's understandable to me that this is what is happening. But
That's
yeah,
fair. I think that's a really fair point, Kaz. I think that the point that really stands out to me that you made there was whether it's subconscious or not. And I think if you're slogging through a shit show of a season like the one that we're in the midst of, and you could point at a few rays of positivity and glean onto those as your focal points. We've only lost once in this competition, if I'm not mistaken, right? To Galatasaray away. And so, I mean, we've had a very good performance. We were at the beginning of the season, we were favorites to win this competition. And until the snipers started showing up in our training sessions, like we had continued to be the favorites to win this competition. There's, as the season's gone along, there are certainly some teams that are in it that have stood out as formidable foes. But I still really like our chances towards the business end of the season to do something in these cup competitions. Huge cup guy, P.S. But it's tough because you still have to get the results in the league, Andrew. You still have to get them.
Well, you've got to get enough of them to remain in the league at this point. Like, honestly, I'm not.
That's all I care about.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be like a doomer or like really, really lower the expectations. But at this point of the season, where we are, how many matches are we at? 23 matches in or something like that? 24? I can't even remember the exact number, but like you're 2/3 of the way or thereabouts through this thing, and you haven't won in 7 games. You have as many losses on your ledger as the relegation teams do. Like that's where we are at this point. 23 matches in. You have 13 defeats, I think it is now. Like just survive at this point and see what you can do in the cups. Like I'm not even sitting here. You're talking about being a favorite to win the Europa League. I'm not even getting that far ahead. Like I'm saying, go do what you need to do against Elfsborg on Thursday and ensure that you don't have to play in the playoff round.
For sure.
And then when it comes to the League Cup, the FA Cup, go see what you can do. Like, have at it. Have fun.
Let me ask you this.
But my expectations are nowhere else other than those places.
We said, Scotty, at the beginning of the season, and jokingly, of course, at the time, that I'd take a relegation fight if it meant winning a cup or two. And I still absolutely
ain't a joke anymore.
Ain't a joke anymore. I absolutely am on the train that a firm 14th place finish and a Europa League title and a League Cup. And I'm over here, I'm helping commission the trophy the statue that they're going to build for Ange outside of the new lane. Like I am saying right now that success for Tottenham Hotspur in this season hinges on these cup competitions. And so I think the more I think about it, Kaz, the more I think you're absolutely right. I feel even if it's subconscious, like the players want these cups.
Yeah, like I'm not saying the players are throwing the league games by any means. I just think they're putting in such a Herculean effort in these midweek cup games that it's natural for them to like slightly take their eye off the ball when they come to these league games, and they don't have a lot left to give. Like that's the other thing.
It's also just so natural and poetic for Harry Winks and Oliver Skip to come in and do like that's where we are from.
Well, James Madison is not playing against his former team.
Exactly. From just a narrative standpoint, that's where we fucking are. Like it's not, we can't get away from that. It's bad.
I would like to officially add Jamie Vardy to the list of punchable faces that people that I would rather hit in the mouth than shake their hand if I met them in person. It's like him and Jack Wilshere.
Yeah, he's still reminding Spurs fans that he won a Premier League title today. He was just pointing at the badge.
What did I say in our group chat earlier this morning? Jamie Vardy and Jordan Ayew are the perfect foil for this team, and they are combined
100%.
They're combined 71 years old, the two of them.
Well
like, that's where we
are. Like this conversation is kind of what I was talking about earlier in the chat. Like, first of all, I'll say that I firmly believe we're going to win a trophy this year, and I really do believe it.
Which is nuts though.
Like,
I know.
That is nuts.
Trust me, I know. It's like it's Twilight Zone shit. But I think we could. I'm not even going to say we could. I think we will win a trophy this year. I am very concerned about the league. So when you look at again, I understand there's an injury crisis, right? The whole fucking world knows it. But if you look at losing to Leicester at home, you look at the Everton loss, you look at the Wolves result, which I believe was at home as well, I start to ask the question, where are we going to pick up points, if anywhere? And I said jokingly a week ago or so, Southampton is literally the only team that I think we can pick up points against right now. And I'm not joking when I say that. So I am very concerned. And that's where I asked the question. Yes, I know the injury crisis. I know there's an injury crisis. But what are you going to do, Ange Postecoglou, to make sure that we don't get relegated? That's my question. Something has to give. I look at, again, my conversation earlier. Why did you play Pop Sarr and then come out and say, no way I should have played Pop Sarr today, and I knew it? That's concerning. Kulusevski in the midfield has been even with a fully fit squad, the only time we've actually looked commanding this season was with Kulusevski in the midfield. Kulusevski did not play in the midfield today. He could have. Mikey Moore is right there. So, again, I don't have all the details, but from the fans' perspective, these are things that we're seeing, and that's leading me to ask the question, yes, I know there's an injury crisis. Yes, I know it's absolutely fucked, but what are you going to do to make sure we pick up points, Ange? That I know that he's been dealt a horrible hand, but he is the manager, and he's going to have to do something to make sure that we start picking up points. That's the only thing that I've been saying all day.
Well, he's kind of hiding Decky out there as a touchline right winger in this match because Decky was absolutely fucking gassed after the midweek game and gassed after the fucking Everton match. And, wait a second. Decky's played absolutely everything. So if the only rest, and of course you're going to need him against Ilkberg or whoever the fuck we're playing midweek, like Ilsberg, help me, Andrew. Elfsberg. Elfin Forest. What is it?
Elfsborg from Sweden. Come on.
Elfsborg. That's what I said. So obviously you're going to want Decky to play against Elfsberg from Sweden, and so you're gonna have to hide him. You're gonna have to hide him on the right wing today, and that's what we did. Because you don't have a right winger, and I mean you technically could put Sonny out there and have Mikey Moore, or have Mikey Moore play on the right wing if you really want to. Like, yes, you absolutely. But who are you going to go to on the bench when those fucking guys are gassed at 60 minutes because you know they're going to be gassed? Exactly. The only guy that I want to see more of that we're not seeing enough of, in my opinion, is Will Lancashire. And I know that he came on late in the match on Thursday, but I'm like, he must have pissed Ange off is what it was. That's the way, like, the kid's just not ready. No, I'm serious. It feels to me like he's getting a little bit of the Jed Spence treatment. It's like, you'll be ready when you're ready, kid.
Well, he came on briefly today too, but I hear you. Like,
well, and
you know what I mean?
It sounds like we were prepared to send him on loan until this
Solanke
situation with Solanke happened. So it's
Well, and I guess that's kind of where I want to leave this conversation on the men's side of things, because there's only a few days left in the month of January. Like, is there anything else going to get? Like, we have signed one player, and as Todd so eloquently mentioned earlier, he ain't an outfield player, and I'm glad he's here, Kinski, but like, they need help elsewhere for sure.
I'm excited Vicario's coming back too. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I think it's going to be very interesting. I mean,
I don't
think you can play both of them at the same time, unfortunately, but.
No, but I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what.
I'll do it.
I'll tell you what, dude.
If do a job at center back, I'm just saying.
Facts.
But here's the real problem. Anton Kinski is the best passer on the team, and he plays goalkeeper. Like, that's a problem.
And I don't know if you noticed this today, but and it's something that I've been noticing consistently. He's very commanding in the box, and his punches are extremely strong.
He's got a pitch on him for sure.
I don't think he's the shot stopper Vicario is, but I think that's he's also 21.
But I think we knew that.
Yeah. Well, no. Here's my issue, though. Here's my issue is that when you play a system where you're going to leave a lot of one-on-ones, like, you need a shot stopper. When you're going to need, like, Vicario, think about how many times Vicario saved us when our center backs have gotten beat. When Poro's too high up the pitch. And Vicario comes out of fucking nowhere. Like, and that's not what Kinski does. I'm not saying that he can't get better at that. I'm just saying, but I feel like Vicario's ability to do those things well is part reflex, but also part the fact that he's 6 years Kinski's senior. And so if Kinski can grow with him, his natural ability with his feet will take him further than Vicario's ever will.
And he's the long-term thing. In terms of the short term, I don't know what else is going on, if anything.
Could we talk about Brandon Austin real quick just before we move to this? Like, I want to give that guy a shout.
Actually,
I truly believe
really
that he solidified himself as the number 3 keeper for this squad for as long as he wants to stay here. He could also very much.
I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to cut you off, but hasn't he already kind of been that guy?
He's fourth choice. He's fourth choice because of Fraser Forster.
Well, no, I'm going to tell you right now.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Agreed. Not anymore. But here's the thing: he was fourth choice, tied for fourth choice, or tied for third choice when the season started. Right? He was the 1A emergency goalkeeper.
Emergency, yes, and
exactly.
He's been
I
there.
think what he's done in the short time that he's played for us, I think what he's done is solidified that if he wants to remain here and be a homegrown third keeper, Scott Carson option for the rest of his life, live in London, have hot girlfriends, do whatever he's doing, and that's like his jam, done.
He can have hot girlfriends. He can have hot boyfriends. I don't care what he has.
Whatever you're into, my guy. I mean, if you've seen that guy out and about, like he's very comfortable where he is.
Keep doing what you're because his performance the other night against Hoffenheim, I'm like,
dude, so good.
Hey, man, that's all I need.
So good.
So I'm glad that you shouted him out. But
now
this short term,
do you sell him?
No, you don't sell him. Come on. No, but like in terms of what this team is doing in the next 5 days, 6 days, like what. Anything?
I expect some Daniel Levy, Johan Langa shit. Something out of nowhere that nobody saw coming, and we look at it and we go,
loan him back, and then have him.
No. We would have done that earlier in the window, and that wave of disappointment would have already crashed. What I'm talking about more specifically is we're going to bring in somebody where you're like, oh, fucking that guy. I mean, yeah. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. I guess let's give it a shot. If they think this is going to work, let's see how it goes. That's literally what I'm expecting in the next 5 days or whatever. It's nothing going to be like, oh yes, Milan Skriniar finally shows up at Hotspur away. Like obviously that guy went to Fibonacci or whatever, but like it's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be something out of left field. Kaz, what do you think?
Caroline?
Wow, I was going to let you go, but the only thing I have to say is that I would be perfectly happy with a loan. That's all I expect at this point.
Yeah, I saw an interesting article that said that we were now open to permanent moves as of like yesterday. So maybe alluding to the fact that now we're good. But I think another concern on top of everything else we've talked about from no clubs wanting to deal with Spurs is what we saw with Kolo Muani. It's now reported he had a choice, Spurs or Juventus, and he said, oh, baby, Juventus all fucking day. I want nothing to do with that club in North London. And I think that is a legitimate concern that we have too, and probably some of why we're dabbling into like the teenage options, right, all over the place. Bergvall came out and said, I picked Spurs because I'd get more opportunities to play. Cool. I like that in some regards, but I also don't like that in some regards as well, right, when it comes to the prospect of what we're looking at now in the league. So we're going to have trouble getting reputable mid-20-year-old players to come to Spurs right now because of everything they see that's happening, the wage structure, just the complete dumpster fire of an organization that we've shown to be over the past 5 years, right? I do think there's some concerns there. Marcus
That's
Rashford,
a bit hyperbole. I think what it boils down to is money. I think it just boils down to money. We won't pay the wages. Yeah, we just won't pay the wages.
That's what I'm saying. That's a massive problem. I don't think it's hyperbole. 100%. I think it's a massive problem.
No. The rest of it, the how much of a dumpster fire we've been over the last 5 years. Like we've literally ascended in a bunch of ways. If we win the Europa League this year, then we're in the Champions League next year. All of a sudden, this argument goes out the window. Mid-20s players want to come to us because we have a great facility and a great stadium, and you're in London and all the things. I'm just like, it boils down to, are you going to pay me? And Daniel Levy has shown I'm going to pay you on par with Southampton, regardless of where we play. And that sucks. But if you get goal bonuses, I'll pay you bonuses.
Okay, I understand everything you're saying. I would ask you the question: who's the last player that came to Spurs that had their career elevated in the correct trajectory from making that move? I have a hard time answering that question, man. I really do. And I think players pay attention to those types of things.
So just for clarity, you're saying that the profile of a player like Cudi Romero or Dejan Kulusevski has not elevated since coming to Spurs, and I would disagree with you.
I
And
think
so,
I think those are answers to my question, and I
Decky,
think those are,
yes.
for
well,
sure.
I mean, you got to understand, Christian Romero won a World Cup while playing for Spurs. So I mean,
No, he won a
with
World,
Argentina.
no. Oh, yeah, he won a World Cup while playing with Argentina.
Yeah, no.
feel
Not for Spurs, but while playing. And that's the thing is that you're in a top tier market. You're in the best league of the world. Like before, he was playing at Atalanta. Like you can't tell me that it's on par. And so that, of course, he's elevated his profile.
But you're talking
and
about
I would
two
say
very
that,
different things, though. When you're talking about
no,
playing
the
for
man asked the
Argentina
question.
versus playing for Spurs, like
the man asked the question about elevating his profile. And I don't think that you can argue with the fact that Cudi Romero's profile has been elevated over his time at Tottenham.
So two people, and I'm literally looking back.
Oh, dude, come on, Scotty Vicario. Come on. Like if we really Pop Sarr moving from Metz that was going down to the second league in France, like you got to say and this is a guy that won the African Cup of Nations with Senegal. Like you got to say Richarlison doesn't become the starting number 9 consistently if he doesn't make that move.
But
and now, granted, he's not there because he's hurt.
Here's the thing, though, Todd. I don't know that I'm comfortable with just pointing out who are the players who have elevated their profile since joining Spurs. That's not what I want this club to be. I don't want this club to be.
No, that was the question that was asked. It's the only reason why
I understand what you're saying.
I'm asking the question because I'm looking at who's actually going to want to come to Tottenham right now with the situation at hand. Very few people. That's my only point to this whole point of this conversation and the question that
James Madison wanted to make the move.
Here's where we can find the middle ground, though. Okay, because I think you guys are saying similar things. Madison wanted to come because Spurs wanted him, and because otherwise he was going down. He
was going to go somewhere.
Correct, and Spurs sent him that lifeboat. You
could say the same thing about Decky. You could say the same thing about Bentancur. You could say the same thing about a lot of those. And I think so. Scott's point is valid. We shop in the dented can section at the grocery store, and it's the contents is still good. It just looks like Dejan Kulusevski, and so you gotta So,
but I think when you do that, I think when you shop down those aisles, what you have to do if you want to get better looking groceries or better looking furniture or whatever metaphor we're going to use here, is you have to overpay for it.
Exactly.
And that's where Spurs are failing to do so. If you want return on investment, you have to overinvest, and that's where we get back to a wage bill conversation.
Now, I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back and say, if you want return on investment, you have to buy early enough and be right enough for that investment to bear fruit.
Well, but that's Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall.
This is what I'm talking about. And this is the Johan Lange system. My concern and my issue is that you have to balance that out with some value purchases at or above market value along the way. And we haven't done that second part.
You're buying seeds, not ripened fruit at that point.
Right, and the ripened fruit that you're buying is down the Ibisuva dented can aisle.
Right. That's not ripe. That's.
You also have to be willing to fail sometimes, and that's something that we are seemingly uninterested in doing. Right, buying players who may not work out. They may be amazing. They may not work out. We're not really interested in that either. So there's a lot of reasons why things don't work out for us. Marcus Rashford, it's reported this morning, is going to go to West Ham, it sounds like. There was Barcelona. There was all these other things. It looks like he's on his way to West Ham. The only reason that we're not getting him and he's going to West Ham is the wage structure, right? So there's all these – I can't say that for sure, right? But all I'm saying is if he's interested in going to West Ham, he'd probably be interested in coming to Spurs too, but there's reasons why those things don't happen, right? And we could use somebody like him right now. He's also a fantastic dude, footballing aside. So – anyways, there's a lot that goes into this bullshit, and Spurs have really failed themselves in just countless ways.
Look, the answer to many questions, if not all questions, ends up being money. You can you can fix a lot of your refusal to have failures with money. Like that's how you fix it. You just throw money at the problem, but Spurs are not going to do that in any way that is satisfactory, especially in any way that is satisfactory over the next 5 days, new signing or not. I'm a little baffled, and I don't see how this is getting better quickly, but we'll have to leave it there when it comes to talking about that, because we'll have a conclusion by next week's pod as to whether they actually did do anything in the month of January. I want to transition a little bit to Spurs Women here, because Spurs Women did bring in someone who scored a pretty important goal for them in a match against, again, a relegation opponent in Crystal Palace today. Spurs Women did get a 3-2 victory on a late free kick from Olivia Holt, which was wild to watch because it practically looked like a penalty as to how close it was. Look, there have been 3 matches that Spurs Women have played in the year 2025, and we have not been able to talk about any of them. The first was a 1-0, kind of lackluster 1-0 over Leicester, another relegation candidate. Then Spurs at midweek this past week were knocked out of the League Cup in a quarterfinal against West Ham in 2-1 defeat. And then today we're up 2-0, blew that lead, but then, as I mentioned, got the late winner on a free kick and won 3-2 over Crystal Palace. Caroline, I read your mid-season review for Spurs Women in your great newsletter this week, and I thought it was very fair yet stern in that this is a team that is still kind of just existing almost, which for lack of a better term is a good thing, I guess. Disappointment in the cup aside, they are starting to kind of show some signs as they're getting players back, as they can be a pretty good mid-table team, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'm feeling quite as optimistic as you right now. Like, I'm not going to lie, I was very, very down after that cup exit the other day. Not that I felt like we had a realistic chance of ever winning it, knowing who was left after West Ham, but I think the nature of how we went out was just very disappointing. And yeah, I feel like existing definitely describes the state of the team right now, because I think we have, some players who are frankly just kind of phoning it in lately. And this includes players that, in past seasons I've really loved and appreciated. So that's disappointing to me. And I think in terms of like, we've been having the transfer window discussion on the men's side, and it's not, informed by an injury crisis on the women's side, but I do feel like we're still in kind of the same situation where we're not making those ambitious moves that we would like to see. Yeah. And, credit to Olivia Holt, who scored a very important goal on her debut. That's great. I was kind of worried about this transfer because, this was a player who came in injured. We didn't know what she was going to look like when she actually got onto the pitch. So relief, that it looks like she could be a valuable contributor after all. But I still don't feel great about the goalkeeper signing that we made. I don't think that showed ambition. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would like to be feeling optimistic about, the fact that they are firmly mid-table. Like, we're not worried about relegation this season, so that's a good thing. I just don't see the gap to the top teams closing. And couple that with like the fact that Naomi Girma just signed for Chelsea, Man City signed Caroline. It's like, I don't know what we're doing here,
Yeah.
Well, we're doing a lot of what. I mean, we just had an hour-long conversation about what are we doing here, and I think these two things do kind of correlate in some ways, where the investment is not there from a financial standpoint on the women's side, especially. I think it's exacerbated on the women's side because the gap between, and we've talked about this a lot, but the gap between those couple of top teams in the WSL and the middle is wide enough. When you talk about the gap between the top and the bottom, it's way wider. So it is a little bit disconcerting there, but I think that there were fears that we had at least earlier in the season that this was going to turn into, oh gosh, are we going to be facing a relegation battle? And at least it looks like the job that Robert Villaham has done in getting and frankly, let's be honest, Bethany England is a godsend. Like, she has been incredible still, and has been just taking the other 10 players and carrying them along. Like 2 goals in this match against Palace.
Spurs and a world-class striker carrying them through. Who would have thought, right?
There are some weird narratives there that are fitting.
I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, please.
I think I'm guilty of giving the women's team a pass at times, and I'm sure there are other fans who are with me there, and I think it's because it feels like they're a little bit closer to where they're supposed to be than the men's team, and there's problems in that statement itself for sure that we could unpack, right? But I think I get more on the men's team than the women's team, and again, that's where I say I maybe give them a little bit of a pass, maybe where I shouldn't, right? And the investment is applicable in all of that. Same thing as on the men's side, right? So I'm not just like slagging Robert or the girls when I say that, but I, like you, Caroline, I was pretty pissed off when we fell out of the cup to West Ham. That was really the last time in a while that I had feelings over a Spurs match on either side, women's or men's, right? And maybe it's because it was a cup and we're all big cup people or whatever, but I was pretty irritated after that match. I think because, first of all, you're close to a final at that point, or close enough to a final, right? It's West Ham. It's a big rival. But at the end of the game, when we needed a goal, I saw players showing for the ball in some regards. And I think the best way I can explain that is they were showing for the ball, but not moving towards the ball. And so there was an understanding of what needed to happen, but maybe a lack of effort. And I think that's why I was so irritated. There was a lot of misplaced passes from minutes 80 to 90 in the final third. And again, it was girls not coming to the ball and again, trying to show for the ball, but not making the effort to go give themselves space and time to receive the ball. Right. And that's an effort thing for me. So I was really disappointed to see that type of effort in a cup match, especially.
Well, and to me, it feels like in terms of, our style of play and our performances, it feels like we're going backwards from where we were at times last season. Yeah. And, we've talked about this a little on N17 Women. Losing Evelina Simonin to a, midterm, fairly long injury is really going to hurt us, I think, because she's a big part of like keeping us from being totally vulnerable defensively. Because I still don't feel like we've landed on a perfect center back partnership. The fullbacks, like they're being told to be more attacking. So I get that. But I do feel like we're still conceding far too many goals. And I don't know. It's just tough because I agree with you. I feel like it was an effort issue. And that was why I was so upset by it. Because this is a team where we don't have the most talented squad in the league. We have to be giving full effort. So kind of like Anne just talking about, I have to expect nothing more than like total effort. But if we're not getting that, then it's not good.
Well, and it's about winning the games you're supposed to win too, though. Like that,
which we nearly did not do today.
Correct, but results are results. So like, I get what you're saying about being, maybe being a little bit easier on the Spurs women side of things than on the men's side of things. I feel a little bit of that at times too, but for me, it is an expectations thing. I think that the gap in investment is so wide when it comes to when you're talking about, the Manchester clubs, Chelsea, Arsenal, in the WSL, like those are the teams that are going to be at the top. It's a little bit more almost the model of like, how on the men's side of things, how like, Juve is always going to win Serie A. I mean, I know not recently, but like, or Bayern is always going to win the Bundesliga. Like there are only a handful of teams that are getting to the top because the gaps are just, the gaps are there. The gaps are wide. So I do get what you're saying. I think that while we bitch and moan so much about everything that we did for the first 60 minutes of this podcast, like a lot of that energy could also be expounded into hey, why aren't we doing more on this side of things too? And I think that there needs to be some recognition that like Spurs women could be doing everything that Arsenal and City and, United and Chelsea are doing as well. Like, I hated seeing Naomi Gurma sign with Chelsea. Like, that could have been Spurs women. They have the money to do something like that, but it's just everyone knows it's not going to happen. For what reason?
Well,
We don't have there's not a good one. I know that.
To Scott's point, there are times this season where I've asked myself, why do I still care? Because I don't feel like the club always cares. And that is the toughest part of the situation for me. So I don't know. It's just strange to feel less emotionally invested this season when we're like, objectively doing okay than I did in the relegation scrap season. I don't know. The club has to think about the fact that they have to give fans something to care about, or people are going to check out. Like, that's just the reality.
Well, and I will say too, apathy is worse than being bad too. Like apathy, like that is the case with a lot of things. I've found that in a number of fandoms in my lifetime. Like, you don't want to be mid. You'd almost rather be bad and have something to scrap and fight for than be mid, because apathy can be really, really dangerous. I'm not saying that like that's not like fully true, Todd. I see your reaction to that. Like, be careful what you wish for.
Well, no, I'm over here going, isn't that exactly what we got going on right now, my guy?
Well, no, because I don't think Spurs women are bad. They're not going to be scrapping for in a relegation fight. I know you're probably talking about on the men's side, but like that produces more anger than I think apathy. I think there's a lot more anger on because of the way that's gone. But like apathy.
Well, I feel like there's a ton of apathy because we realized that after 16 managers, it's not the fucking manager. And so it's not going to change until Levy leaves. And so I don't know how, as much promise as there is on the women's side, I don't know how much the likelihood is going to go up that we're going to do the things required for us to really challenge.
Well, and I think that, why I get disappointed when I see the women not performing well is, you guys know I've been battling apathy on the men's side, frankly, since Pochettino left. And it's been tough. And I think that's where some of why, like, it's a little bit of a bit, right? But some of why I was so like, bring Poch back, is I just wanted to feel the way that I felt when he was at the club. That was it for me, right? That was such just an exciting, just emotionally invigorating point in my life, those years under Poch, and I've really missed that. And on the women's side, I didn't feel that apathy for the last probably 3 seasons, and it was just really nice, right? And as that starts to sink in a little bit, it's troubling for me, for sure. And I also, I just lost my train of thought. No.
Well, let me hop in, because I agree with you. I feel like in Robert's first season in charge, it was like reinvigorating, after having those kind of tough seasons where we did get close to relegation. Because it felt like, same on the men's side, it felt like the club was committing to a strategy, committing to the attacking football, and we had clear goals to work towards. And you started to see some evidence of that last season when we were getting these really like statement results against the top teams. And you're feeling like, okay, progress is being made. I see where we're going. And then we come in this season and it to me, it does feel like we're going backwards. So that's the tough thing. And I also think this isn't just an issue like for Tottenham as a club. It's an issue for the league, that so much of the focus and so much of like the airspace, so to speak, is sucked up by the top 4 clubs. And also like the thing that frustrates me also with English football as opposed to like NWSL over here is the constant focus on the Lionesses players. I feel like this is like a failure of marketing for the league as a whole. But it's also a thing where I come to watch the games, and, this goes for the cup match midweek and then the game today. The broadcast quality is so frustrating to me. Like, I really am at the point where I'm fed up with it, because we can't get proper highlight angles, to have any sort of proper opinion on things like offside calls, penalties at times. you're lucky if you get more than one angle period on a replay or a replay at all. You know, there are times when I'm like, oh, I'd like to see that again, and I'm expecting it to come, and then there's nothing. You know, we still got a situation where it's one commentator for every game. There's no sort of conversation happening. There's no storytelling about the narratives in the league, within teams, within players. And I'm at the point where I think it's kind of unforgivable, because you compare it to NWSL, who have made leaps and bounds in this aspect with the broadcast deal. And I genuinely think it comes down to the fact that the broadcasters in the UK, you know, your Sky Sports and your BBC, they do not care to improve it because they don't want it to compete with the Premier League as a product. Like, that's just how I feel. And I'm just going to say it.
Well, I don't disagree with you, and it's also a question of just money. Like that, those are the answer for me. Whenever you talk about these types of things, it's investment, it's money. I mean, women's sports in general has improved so much here in the States because of the investment in the product. Like, we're getting
and I don't see
games,
the willingness to invest over there. I don't
either
see it, and it's at the club level too.
Well, it's at the club level, but it's we in this country take a relatively progressive view to women's sports, and that unfortunately is not a perspective that's shared in all corners of the world, and especially in Britain, there is scoffing by some at the female game, and it sucks, and it's terrible, and there's no place for it. But I think that bias is evident in the lack of production value. I don't think that can be overlooked. And I think that also is the other piece about, like you made the point, Kaz, and I think it's a really good one, about the focus on the Lioness players. And the thing is realistically what these British outlets are looking at is the crossover marketing for the national team, and just basically using the WSL to fund or feed the interest of the national team. And I don't think that that's the way to go about it, but I feel like that's a pretty apt description of how it's being done.
Well, because I'm already hearing panic from certain quarters about, you know, what happens if England flames out of the Euros this summer and they don't build upon, you know, their title from the last go around. And I feel like that should not be the question. The question should be, how do we promote the players from the countries that are going to perform well? How do we make sure that, you know, if a team doesn't have a Lioness in its squad, how do we get fans excited about them? So, and I think Spurs are guilty of that to some extent. Like, the marketing of the women's team is heavily reliant on Beth England, who obviously we all love and appreciate and are so thankful for. But, you know, we've got other players that, you know, they need to get some shine too. Although some of them have not deserved it this season, I will say.
Yeah,
well,
I would also say, no, you're good. I 100% agree with Todd that we are far more progressive in the U.S. when it comes to pushing women's sports. I would also say I argue with people in my life pretty consistently about their just shitty views about women's sports here in the States as well. So it's not always perfect. And I think that the women's team, the women's national team here in the States being a decade ahead of everybody else has definitely played into that, right? And obviously it's not perfect, but the small growth we've seen in the WSL, of course, came from the Lionesses winning the Euros, right? It all stems from that. So I think maybe trying to add a little bit of hope that things can continue to improve, but to Caroline's point, maybe not for the right reasons. And that's the big issue, right? What I was going to say earlier too, when I lost my train of thought, kind of bleeds into some of this, because I was going to say that I think when it comes to Spurs specifically, sometimes I feel like anything they've done with the women's team, which is pretty limited to this point, right? But anything they've done was kind of like, we have to do this because it's a bad look if we don't, is kind of the vibe that I get sometimes, right? But Enoch looks at the women's team and says, oh, there's not enough following for this to be profitable. There's not anything worth us actually investing in this, right? Because of money, like you said a couple of times, Andrew, right? So I think it's just, again, I don't know if that's controversial. I don't think any of you think it is, right? But I think it's a pretty shitty optic from the club when I look at the fact that it really just feels that anything they've done was out of necessity and not looking like they're not progressive, right?
Well, and I think that one of the things that sport in general, whether it's men's sport, women's sport, it provides community, and you kind of just almost, especially in this day and age, just where we are in society at large, you have to find your community. And hopefully we can be part of that too, talking about these types of things. I know, Caroline, the work you guys do on N17 Women's podcast, like these are the types of places you go to find that and embrace that, and hopefully not become apathetic about results and, you know, the grander issues of lack of investment and lack of financial backing in where it goes. Because I do think, unfortunately, I always say that, but like a lot of the answers to the questions as to why things are the way they are, most of the time it has to do with money, and most of the time it has to do with investment. So the way that you kind of combat that is to continue to promote them and talk about them, and that's kind of why we do it. And because it interests us, and because it creates community and promotes community and gives us something to all bond over or commiserate over, whichever the attitude lays on a given week. I think that's gonna do it for this episode of the Hot and Depot. We gave you a little bonus pod, extra pod this week because we missed last week. We'll be back next week as long as the voice suffices. I'm battling through it over here, and we're all battling through it as we kind of watch what's going on around us with these teams. Everyone's just trying to get through. Does it not feel like the month of January has been 4 years long? Like, my goodness, can we just put an end to this damn thing already? Plenty of games coming up this week. Spurs men, as I mentioned, back in action on Thursday in the Europa League for the final group stage match against, yes, Todd, Elfsborg of Sweden. That is who they got. A win will put them through to the round of 16 automatically, maybe even a draw, but let's just go get the 3 points and make sure of that. Then they're back in league play on Sunday with a trip to Brentford. On the women's side, it's an FA Cup tilt away to Everton on Wednesday, and then they have a big one hosting Manchester United next Sunday. So we'll be back to talk about those matches, and I'm sure a whole hell of a lot more. TC, did you have something you needed to get off here at the end?
I'm just curious, man. It's just a quick question. Like,
oh God! Why did I even open this up? Here, go ahead.
Get into the round of 16 of the Europa League without the extra issues, and you're seeded, which is important because you avoid like the bruisers, right?
The bigger teams. Yep.
You got it. And you're in the have a goal lead going into a second leg of a semifinal in a League Cup, and you're still in the FA Cup and looking halfway decent at the fixture there. If you get some folks back, like, is that enough?
I don't think we're beating Brentford anyway. So
is that enough to keep Ange in his job? Because I feel like if you lose one of these matches, if you lose the Elfsborg and you lose at Brentford, like I at that point in time, I don't really know what to say.
I'm shocked that your question wasn't, does Ange keep his job if we get relegated but we win a cup? That's really where I thought you were going with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking a little more inside the lines on that one. But since you're asking such outlandish questions there, Kaz, I think that this is a really critical a quandary for this pod and for its listeners. If we win the Europa League, this is the critical piece. If we win the Europa League, so we get Champions League football next year, and we get relegated, is Ange still our manager come the beginning of the season?
Dude, Ange would run rampant in the championship. I'll tell you that. His style of play, he would just run through the championship. We might not lose a game.
We might not lose.
You do realize it's more games in the championship. Like,
there's like 46 matches in the championship, bro. Like we're in the Champions League and 2 cups, and we have to start the League Cup like 2 rounds earlier.
No,
this is a really good point. That gives me a lot of appreciation for championship clubs. The grueling aspect of their season. I hadn't really thought about that.
It is.
I'm just not answering your question. Really, is what's happening here.
We'll be the only club in the championship with a fucking go-kart track.
That's for damn sure. Oh
You-
man, there's no better place to leave it there than there. Be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. Leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice. And follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot. For Caroline at CG Stefco, for Todd at TC_Kashow on X, the Todd Father on Blue Sky. Scott is at Scott G Bird. You can follow me at Aestetka and follow us at Tottenham Depot. We will be back next week to talk a lot more about many similar topics. Until then, as always, come on, you Spurs.